My name's Daniel. I'm 26. I was living out of a suitcase the summer it all started. I just lost my lease after a series of roommate disasters and, with nowhere affordable in the city, I took a friend's offer to crash at his family's lake house. It was a couple of hours out, nestled in this sleepy town where the Wi-Fi sucked but the air always smelled like pine and morning fog. I told myself it was temporary, just until I figured things out. The place belonged to his aunt. Or, well, technically, she was the one living there. She's cool, just keeps to herself, my buddy had said. You won't even notice her. I didn't think much of it. The first night I arrived, the house felt like a page out of an old magazine. Worn floorboards, faint lavender in the air, and one of those ticking clocks that somehow makes silence louder. I expected some retired woman in glasses and house slippers. Instead, she opened the door barefoot, in linen pants and a sleeveless top, her hair still damp like she'd just come in from the garden. She looked maybe late 40s. But it was hard to tell. There was something in the way she held herself, shoulders back, calm eyes, that made time feel irrelevant. She smiled, polite but distant. "You're Daniel," she said. Not a question. "Come in. The guest room's upstairs." Her name was Elise. The first week was uneventful. We hardly spoke beyond good mornings and thanks for the dinners. She worked from home, ran some design consultancy or something, and I kept busy fixing up odd repairs around the house in exchange for staying. It was peaceful, if a bit too quiet. She'd float in and out of rooms like she was made of smoke, never raising her voice, never rushing. I tried not to be in her way. But then, gradually, the air started to shift. It was little things. The second Friday, I came downstairs late at night to grab water. She was in the living room, curled up on the couch with a book and a glass of red wine. She looked up and smiled, softer this time. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. Her voice was lower than usual, less guarded. I shrugged. Not used to so much quiet. She patted the armrest beside her. "Join me, if you like." We didn't talk much. Just sat there, listening to the old jazz record spinning quietly. I don't know what changed that night. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. But after that, something was different. She started leaving a second mug of coffee out in the mornings. I started lingering in the kitchen longer than I needed to. And then there were the glances. Brief, precise, like she was reading something in me I didn't know was there. She wasn't flirting, exactly. But I felt, noticed. The way her eyes paused when I entered a room. The way she asked about my plans but never pushed. It was tension, but the kind you don't name. Not at first. Then one evening, the power went out. Storm rolled through unexpectedly. I was on the porch when it hit, watching the trees sway when she stepped out behind me, pulling a cardigan tight around her. "Guess we're off the grid," she said. We lit candles. Made tea on the gas stove. The house glowed like a memory. I don't remember what we talked about, books, maybe? Family. Something about travel. What I do remember is the moment I handed her the mug, and our fingers touched. It wasn't dramatic. Just warm. Still. She held my gaze a second longer than normal and said, "Thank you, Daniel." I said, "For what?" And she didn't answer. That night, lying in bed with the wind howling outside, I couldn't stop thinking about her voice. The quiet way she said my name. Like it meant something. The next morning, I came down to find her already at the table, wrapped in a soft blue sweater, hair pulled back loosely, reading the newspaper like we hadn't shared that strange moment the night before. She looked up, met my eyes, and smiled. Not a word about it. But I couldn't shake it. I spent most of that day outside, sanding down a cracked railing by the porch, trying to give myself something simple to focus on. I kept thinking, did I imagine it? Maybe I read into it too much. Maybe it was just kindness. That theory fell apart that evening. It was late again. She was in the kitchen, lights dimmed, jazz playing low. She was barefoot, humming as she chopped vegetables for dinner. I'd come in to grab a book, but ended up just standing in the doorway watching her for a few seconds too long. She turned. "You hungry?" Yeah, I said, trying to pretend I hadn't been staring. "Sit," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. We ate in the little sunroom that overlooked the lake. Candle on the table. Wind brushing the windows. It was just the two of us, but it felt like we were stealing something, like the night wasn't meant to be this intimate, and yet there we were. After we cleared the plates, I stood up to take mine to the sink. She reached across the table, just lightly, and touched my wrist. "Leave it," she said. "Just sit with me a minute longer." So I did. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. Her gaze didn't leave mine. I think she knew I was unraveling inside. That I didn't know what to do with this connection building between us. That I was scared, because this wasn't some college crush. It was her. And she wasn't asking anything from me, but I was giving it anyway. Eventually, she stood. I followed her into the kitchen without thinking. She started rinsing dishes. I took the towel from the hook and began drying. We moved in sync, quiet, close. My shoulder brushed hers once. Then again. I glanced at her. She didn't look away. Then, without planning it, without meaning to be bold, I said, "Do you ever feel like you're waiting for something to happen?" She stopped rinsing. Her hand stayed under the water. Then she said, "Sometimes. But lately, I think I've stopped waiting." She turned off the faucet. Dried her hands slowly. Then reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Good night, Daniel," she said, and walked past me toward the stairs. I stood there with the towel still in my hand, like a ghost. 2 days passed before we were alone again. She'd gone into town on Saturday and I'd used the time to reset, to remind myself of where the lines were. I told myself I was imagining everything. That I needed to grow up. Stop reading into kindness. But that Sunday night, we found ourselves in the same room again. She'd poured herself a small glass of wine and offered me one. I said no at first. Then changed my mind. She smiled when I did. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, like always. A movie played, but neither of us was really watching. It was during a quiet part that she shifted. Pulled the blanket off the back of the couch and spread it over both of us without asking. Our legs brushed beneath it. My breath caught. She didn't say anything. Just sipped her wine and looked ahead. Then, her hand rested lightly on my thigh. Not forward. Not even suggestive. Just, there. Like it had always belonged. I looked at her. She looked back. "I don't know what this is," I said, my voice low. She didn't answer. She leaned in. The kiss was soft. Careful. Like neither of us wanted to admit how long we'd been thinking about it. When it ended, she touched my face, just briefly. Then stood, picked up the glasses, and disappeared into the kitchen without a word. I stayed on the couch. Stunned. Wrecked. Because that wasn't a mistake. That was the first step. After that night, we stopped pretending. Not openly. Not with words. But in every quiet way that matters. The next time we were alone, I didn't knock. She was already waiting in the kitchen when I walked in, turning from the stove like I'd just returned from a long trip, not the upstairs bedroom. She offered me coffee. Her voice was calm. But her eyes gave everything away. That afternoon we didn't kiss. We didn't touch. But everything felt heavier, more fragile. I fixed a crooked picture frame in the hallway. She stood beside me, handing me nails, talking about nothing, weather, books, the smell of the lake after rain. But her voice was softer now. Almost careful. We made room for each other without saying it. I stopped leaving the house during the day. She stopped closing the door when she worked in her study. Sometimes she'd glance up from her laptop and ask me something small, if I wanted tea, if I remembered how to spell bourgeois, if I knew anything about old film cameras. Each question was a little thread pulling us closer. It felt like we were building a routine. A secret one. A parallel life that only existed when no one else was around to see it. And in that strange little world, I started to fall. I didn't mean to. I didn't even notice it at first. It wasn't some grand confession or sweeping moment. It was in the way I memorized the sound of her footsteps coming down the stairs. The way I knew exactly how she took her tea. The way I looked forward to evenings, not because they meant rest, but because they meant her. There was one night I remember more clearly than the others. It had been raining all day, and the house smelled like damp wood and rosemary. I found her in the den, curled up with a blanket around her legs, reading something old. She looked up and patted the space beside her without speaking. I sat down. She reached for my hand, no hesitation, and held it like it was something she'd been missing all her life. "Does this scare you?" she asked after a while. I thought about it. "A little," I admitted. She nodded, as if that was the only right answer. "I've never done anything like this before," she said. "Me neither." She squeezed my hand gently. "But you're not a boy, Daniel. You know that, right?" That stuck with me. Not because I needed to hear it, but because she saw it. We spent that evening wrapped in the same blanket, heads tilted together, watching some old black and white film where nothing happened but everything mattered. When it ended, neither of us moved. We didn't go upstairs. We stayed there, half asleep, her head on my shoulder, my hand resting on her thigh, the room dim and flickering from the last light of the fire. For a while, it was enough. We didn't talk about the outside world. Not the people we weren't supposed to hurt. Not the questions we couldn't answer. It was like we'd agreed, silently, that this space we created had its own rules, none at all. But the longer it went on, the more the silence started to shift. What used to feel safe started to feel stretched. She stopped reaching for my hand so quickly. I started hesitating at the bottom of the stairs. We were still there, still us, but the edges were starting to blur. And then one morning, I came down early, and she was already at the table, staring into her cup like she couldn't remember how it got there. "Daniel," she said, "this can't last." I knew what she meant. But I didn't know how to answer. I didn't answer her right away. I just sat down across from her at the table, the sunlight creeping in through the blinds, painting long shadows between us. Her eyes didn't rise to meet mine. She stirred her tea once. Twice. Then stopped. "I wake up some mornings," she said finally, "and for a second, I forget you're here. And then I remember. And it's..." She stopped herself. Looked out the window instead. "It's like a dream that doesn't know how to end." I nodded slowly, unsure if I was supposed to agree or fight her on it. My throat felt dry. "I don't want to hurt you," she said. "Or myself. And I definitely don't want to hurt anyone else." We both knew who she meant, even if we never said his name. My friend. Her nephew. The silence stretched between us. "I know," I said. "But I don't think I can go back to the way it was before." That made her look at me. Her eyes weren't angry. Just tired. Tired in a way I hadn't seen before. "I wish I met you at a different time," she said. "When things were simpler." I didn't say it out loud, but I'd been thinking the same thing since the day we kissed. The days after that conversation passed slowly. Carefully. We didn't stop, not yet, but we pulled back. Just enough. We still had our moments, quiet ones in the living room, accidental brushes of hands, a shared cup of tea, but the spontaneity was gone. The easy closeness had turned into something laced with tension, like we were always aware that each touch might be the last. The final time I saw her like that wasn't even dramatic. It was raining again. I'd just come in from the porch, shoes wet, hair dripping. She was in the kitchen, chopping something for dinner, sleeves rolled up. She looked over and smiled, not the kind that invited, just the kind that said, "I remember." We ate together. Talked about small things. The smell of the rain. How she'd burned the last batch of cookies. Whether or not I'd found a new place to live yet. Then she stood, rinsed her plate, and said, "I think this should be the last time." I didn't ask, "Why now?" I didn't ask, "Are you sure?" I just sat there and nodded, feeling like a part of me had already known it was coming. She didn't walk me to the door. I left quietly, my shoes still damp, the house still warm behind me. I stayed with a coworker for a few weeks after that. Found a tiny studio downtown that I could barely afford but felt like mine. I tried to settle back into normal life, work, errands, emails, the slow march of being an adult. Some nights I'd come home and stand in the middle of my empty apartment and feel like I'd left something behind I couldn't pack in a box. We didn't keep in touch. I didn't text her. She didn't call. It wasn't a cold silence. It was more like the kind you respect because breaking it would mean pretending nothing had ever happened. And I couldn't pretend. I ran into my friend, the one who first offered me the place, once, about 2 months after I moved out. We grabbed lunch, talked about sports, jobs, stupid things that didn't mean anything. He asked if I'd gotten along okay with his aunt. I said, yeah, she was great. Quiet, mostly. Kept to herself. He nodded like it didn't matter. And maybe to him, it didn't. But to me, it was everything. Time passed. More than I expected. Fall turned to winter. I buried myself in work, long hours, new projects, anything to keep from thinking too much. The apartment stayed mostly bare, just the essentials, a mattress on the floor, a chipped desk by the window, coffee mugs that never made it back to the cabinet. I dated a little. Not seriously. A girl from work, someone from a bookstore. Nice people. Kind. But no spark. Every time we got close, I'd pull away, not on purpose, not to be cruel. It just didn't feel right. Like I was pretending to be someone else. I didn't talk about Elise. Not to anyone. But she stayed with me. Sometimes in my sleep. Sometimes in the way I caught myself staring at quiet spaces, an empty chair, a mug left on a windowsill. Sometimes I'd hear her voice in my head, saying my name the way only she did, slow and careful, like it mattered. Eventually, even that started to fade. I went months without thinking of her, or at least that's what I told myself. But grief doesn't vanish, it burrows. Finds other ways to remind you it's still there. Then, one afternoon in early spring, I had to attend a work event. Some gallery opening we were sponsoring. I wasn't looking forward to it, small talk and bad wine, but I went because I had to. The space was packed, warm with bodies, the air buzzing with soft music and the clink of glasses. I wandered the perimeter, pretending to study the art, mostly just looking for the exit. And then, across the room, I saw her. Elise. Hair shorter now. Dressed in a dark coat, her back to me as she spoke with someone. I almost convinced myself it wasn't her, until she turned. Our eyes met. It was like being hit with a wave you never saw coming. She froze. I did too. Then she smiled, small, unsure, but real. I didn't move for a second. Then I did, slowly, through the crowd, not even thinking about what I'd say. Just moving toward her like gravity had kicked in again. "Hi," I said when I finally reached her. "Hi," she echoed. Her voice. Exactly the same. "I didn't know you'd be here," she said. "Neither did I admitted. Kind of a last-minute thing." She nodded. "I haven't seen you in a while," I finished for her. "Yeah." There was a silence, but it wasn't heavy. Just full. Like something important had taken the space between us again. "You look good," she said. "So do you." She glanced away, just for a second, then back. I should get going soon. I didn't know what I wanted her to say. That she missed me? That she thought of me too? That it hadn't been nothing? Instead, she asked, "Can I walk you out?" We stepped outside together. The air was cool. The sky, that deep blue just before evening. "I almost didn't come tonight," she said. And then I did. I almost left early. She looked at me. And yet. We stood by the street, the gallery lights glowing behind us. She fidgeted with her sleeve. I kept my hands in my pockets. "I'm not with anyone," she said, out of nowhere. It hit harder than I expected. "Me neither," I said quietly. She gave a small nod, eyes searching mine. "I don't know what this means." "Me neither." Then a pause. One that felt like a door swinging open somewhere in the distance. "I still think about you," she said. My heart thudded once, hard. "I think about you too." We didn't make plans. We didn't even exchange numbers. She just touched my arm once, said, "Take care, Daniel," and turned to walk toward a waiting car. I stood there for a long time after she left, staring at the spot where she'd been. The next day, I couldn't focus. At work, my mind wandered. I kept replaying our conversation, the way she looked at me like I still mattered. Like I hadn't just been a passing moment from a strange summer. By the weekend, I was walking the old streets near the lake house without really deciding to. Just drifting. Half hoping I'd see her again, half scared that I might. That I'd have to face everything we hadn't said out loud. And then, like it was the most natural thing in the world, I saw her again. In a bookstore. She was in the non-fiction section, flipping through a photography book. No makeup, hair loosely tied back. She looked up, met my eyes, and smiled like I'd just returned from some long journey. "Daniel," she said, like a question and an answer all at once. I walked toward her. "I was just thinking about you," she said, softly. "Yeah?" She nodded, closing the book. "I didn't think I'd see you again so soon." I didn't either. We didn't talk much. We just stood there, in the quiet hum of the bookstore, and something in me settled. Like whatever weight I'd been carrying had finally found the floor again. She suggested coffee. I didn't even hesitate. We found a small corner cafe down the street. It was mostly empty. She sat across from me, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup as she spoke. We didn't dive into the past. We didn't ask big questions. Instead, it was soft and slow. Like we were relearning each other's shape by the edges. "Eventually," she said, "I moved back into the city a few months ago. Work got too quiet out there. And the house, it started to feel like a museum." I nodded. I knew that feeling. "And you?" she asked. "Still figuring things out." She smiled at that. "Some things don't change." Then, quietly, almost too quiet to hear, she said, "I never stop thinking about you." I looked down. My throat was tight. She added, "I don't know what this is. Or what it should be." "Me neither," I said. But I'm here. That night, she walked with me to the train station. Before I boarded, she looked up at me, eyes a little glassy but steady. "If we do this again," she said, "we have to be honest. About what we want. About what we can't promise." "I can do that," I said. She nodded. And for a moment, she didn't move. Then she stepped in and hugged me, tight, warm, not just polite. Like she meant it. Like she needed to. I didn't want to let go. But I did. Weeks passed. We didn't fall back into the old rhythm, we built something new, quieter, more cautious. No rushing. No sneaking around. Just occasional texts. A coffee here. A walk there. Like two people finding their way through a familiar forest they hadn't visited in years. I saw her once at a public lecture downtown, an architecture panel she invited me to. We sat in the back. She took notes in a slim black notebook. I mostly watched her. Afterward, we got dinner, just soup and bread in a tiny place with fogged-up windows, and she asked me about my life. Not just work. Life. I told her I was thinking of switching jobs. That I wasn't sure where I wanted to live next. That sometimes I still felt like I was waiting for something, even though I didn't know what. She listened. Fully. Like always. And then, when I walked her back to her car, she turned and said, "I don't know what we are now. But when I'm around you, I feel less like I'm performing." I nodded. Me too. We didn't kiss. Didn't even touch. But we lingered. That kind of lingering that says more than most words ever do. Another month went by. We texted less. Work got busy. Her sister got sick. I took on extra projects to cover rent. Life, as it always does, kept moving. Still, every so often, I'd think about those nights in the lake house. The hush of the living room. The way she looked at me when the lights were low and the rest of the world didn't exist. And I'd wonder, not with regret, but with this soft ache, if we'd ever get that again. Then one morning, I got a message. No words. Just a photo. It was her front porch, the one from the lake house. A cup of coffee on the step. The morning light slanting just the way it used to. I stared at it for a long time. Didn't respond right away. That night, I went for a walk. Just around the block. Trying to figure out what I was feeling. There was a tug in my chest, something deep and familiar, something I thought I'd left behind but hadn't. I still haven't answered the message. I don't know what to say. I don't know if we're supposed to find each other again or if this is just the last ripple from something beautiful and broken. But I do know this. When I think of her, my heart still tightens. My throat still catches. And I feel that same quiet, impossible pull. I don't know what to do about this. But my heart is aching again.